Well, you've made it to week 3. And the conversation for this week is about the criminal justice system, adolescents, and we're going to look at, as a provider, as a human service provider, what is our role when we're working with young people who are having some challenges. So first of all, let's talk about this whole issue around criminal justice. You're going to be doing some reading about what the law says, what is considered court cases, how do you plead when you plead guilty for young people. But more than that, I want you to think about, I'm not going to do a lot of talking about that, but I did provide you a TED Talk on the concept of juveniles in the correctional system. And so I have a question, I have a thought-provoking question for you. Is it your opinion that it is proper to put young people between the ages of like 13 and 17, despite what the charge is, in cells with adults? The criminal justice system has said, well, that's not necessarily what we want to do, but they haven't found a really good way to address how do you put these young people in a facility that brings some correction. It's supposed to be rehabilitation, right? But also, how do you keep them safe? And so when you look at this TED Talk, I want you to kind of predict what you think happens to young people. And I'd like for you to shoot out a couple of emails. This is what I think, or you can blog it. You can create a blog in this class if you'd like, or on your discussion board. Create some of the questions that you have before you look at the film. Generate some questions, and then after you look at the video, I'd like for you to talk about how this helped you answer some of those questions, or if you still have questions that you'd like to pose, and that needs to be in your discussion board. When we talk about issues around confidentiality, then there's some responsibilities that we as providers, as human service workers, have to our young people. You know, young people are going to come to you with issues around sexually transmitted disease, around drug use and abuse, and what is your job? Maybe around suicidality, or for some, feelings of homicidality. I mean, like they want to hurt somebody else, hurt themselves, or hurt someone else. And so the question is, what is your role as a human service provider? I'd like for you to think about that as you read the case scenario that I've given you. What is your job? I will tell you that confidentiality is important to young people. In order to win their trust, they need to know that you're going to hold their information. But then the law says there are times when you are obligated to disclose information. So let's talk about what some of those are. And you're reading about it, but I just want to reinforce it. Think about duty to warn in the Tarasoff Act. I want you to read about that and post some questions and some answers on how that relates to Texas. Do a little research. What does the state law in Texas say about the duty to warn? Confidentiality. You can hold a young person's information because, you know, client privilege, unless blank. Take a few minutes and write down what you think the blank is. Okay, welcome back. The answer to the question of when do we disclose information is when a young person has disclosed that they want to harm themselves. And that's with a young person or an adult. If they decide that they want to harm somebody else, the Tarasoff Act kind of speaks to that. In the state of Texas, as providers, we're not legally bound to disclose, but ethically, it is our duty to disclose to a third party if our client has expressed a desire to harm them. When you read about the Tarasoff Act, you will see a young lady died because a psychiatrist didn't forewarn her that his client had already disclosed his plan to kill her. He did tell the police, but he didn't tell her or her family, and as a result, she died. So you have to take that under consideration. The other thing is, do you tell parents everything? Well, not everything. But if a young person is going to harm themselves, harm somebody else, if their behavior, like let's say they're pregnant, you don't have to tell parents that they're pregnant, but you do have to tell them if they've had a sexually transmitted disease, because now they have somebody else in harm's way. You have to disclose to the Department of Health. If they've been in contact with somebody who has a communicable disease, such as Ebola, or something like that, you have to disclose that, because now we're talking about public health. Okay, those are some areas, and you can probably find in your text other areas when we can disclose. So, we've been talking about what our right is and what our responsibility is as a human service provider. And one of the things we fail to think about is how our values kind of spill over into our client's world. So one of the things you have to be very careful to do, that is maintain that professionalism. And so what does that look like? Well, remember, you are the service provider and your client is coming to you because they have some need. And despite how they may push all of your emotional buttons and you really want to put them in their place, our role is to always maintain a role of help. It's not about judgment. It's not about value, trying to get our values over to them. It's really about empowering them to be the best young people they can be. Sometimes it's about their parents, making their parents feel like they're the best parents that they can be. Yes, there are a lot of challenges, and we're going to talk about that this entire semester. But a strengths perspective, and we'll talk about that a little bit more, strengths perspective, the ecological perspective, systems perspective, resilience perspective, theories, all say that a client will do better if you play to their strengths. So if they push your emotional buttons, and we know young people do it all the time, right? They have the talent of finding ways to make you want to scream. That's not what you get to do as a practitioner. The other thing is, remember, when it comes to serving your client, documentation is important. Even in class, we say, if it's not written, finish that sentence. You got it. It didn't happen. Okay? So write. I want you all to have that experience even here when you do those interviews with young people later in the semester. It will be very important for you to document, get those parent consents. It's going to be important for you to get the parents' consent when you interview the young people. All of those things are important in maintaining their confidentiality. Now, there are other situations when confidentiality is to be broken if you're in a substance abuse setting and you're working with young people who have been using or abusing drugs. Again, you maintain their confidentiality unless their behavior or their actions pose a threat to themselves or to someone else. Always remember, you're trying to maintain the common good and the overall public health. You have to have that in mind. Another situation, your main goal is to maintain communication with your client, but also have a support system for yourself. Talk to your colleagues. Confidentiality within an organization is maintained because you all adhere to the same codes of ethics and values. So you can talk about your client to your colleague in your organizational setting, but you do not talk about your client in any way, shape, form, or fashion outside of your professional setting. That's important. And young people can read when you have not maintained a level of truth, authenticity, and genuineness. All of these are qualities that are important. I know you have some experiences with young people. I'd like for you to share in your discussion board how you've had to maintain or been challenged to maintain confidentiality when a young person has come to you in confidence about some behavior or some concerns that they have. I'd like for you to share what you did or what you didn't do, and now that you've read, you realize you could have done differently. Okay? Recognize that you are the professional, and every bit of information that you learn is going to be important for your clients. I really want you to think about ethics and values. So look up what the Human Service Code of Ethics is. You'll find that on the website for the National Organization of Human Services. Look that up. How does that relate to what your role is as a human service provider? I'm really excited about what you're going to see as you read and as you look at the PowerPoint presentations. I always give you the PowerPoint presentations, and I do not regurgitate that information. I build on that. I'm hoping that the activity this week will actually get you engaged and you'll come away with some great thoughts and some great questions. Have a great week.